This is Chapter 1, EMS Systems. So your textbook is going to be your primary resource for your EMT course. So make sure that you're actually reading it, going through it. If you don't want to read it, there is the audio text so you can listen to it, but I would strongly recommend you take notes rather than just relying on the textbook. It's been proven that highlighting is one of the least effective study tools. So taking notes is going to be your best bet. All of the material that we discuss, including what your expectations are, what other requirements you have to meet in order to be licensed or certified as an EMT, will come out of this textbook. You learn the differences between first aid training, a DOT EMR course or emergency medical responder course, and then what you have to do in order to be a full EMT. So EMS overall by itself is considered a system. It consists of a team of healthcare professionals, provides pre-hospital emergency care and transport, and is definitely governed by state laws. There also are federal laws that we fall under, but the states mostly get control over how we run and what we have to do in order to maintain our EMT licensure. So after you complete this course, you're either eligible to take the National Registry or the state certification exam. So here in South Dakota, we don't have a state certification exam. So your final test out to become an EMT will be from the national registries. There are two parts to that test. There's the cognitive exam or the written exam that you take. It's a computer adaptive based test. And then there's the psychomotor exam or the demonstration of skills, and you'll take that as part of the end of your course as well. Once you pass the exam, then you can apply for state certification. That's why we had you create both the NREMT account and the state account so that the state knows that you potentially could be coming for certification. In most states, there's 4 levels of training and licensure. There's the EMR or emergency medical responder, the EMT, emergency medical technician, the AEMT, advanced emergency medical technician, and then the paramedic is the top level with the most training and time behind their license. The EMT course itself has 4 types of learning activities. So you have reading assignments, which again, you can be doing by audio instead of having to read it yourself. Step-by-step demonstrations of hands-on skills. The care sheets or skill sheets are provided in your text, as well as on the first JBL required materials block. It's got your skill sheets from the National Registry as to what you have to do. And then you'll actually demonstrate those step by step for us on lab days, as well as for that psychomotor test out. You also have summary skill sheets and then case presentations and scenarios. EMTs are basically the backbone of the EMS system. You can't do anything at a more advanced level if you're not a good EMT to begin with. Some patients that you'll be treating may be in life-threatening situations. Others require only supportive care. It's actually more common that we come across patients that only require supportive care rather than true life-threatening situations, but you need to have a solid foundation in both. Licensure requirements. So typical requirements to be an EMT, you have to have a high school diploma or equivalent, so the GED is considered equivalent. You have to have proof of immunizations against certain communicable diseases, successful completion of a background check and drug screen. Your employer will do that portion of it. We just do a self-disclosure background check and we don't do drug screening. Valid driver's license, successful completion of all required courses and certification exams. One of those is your FEMA training. You have to do the FEMA 100, 200, and 700 level. They're included under that required materials portion. They're also included under Chapter 39 because that's the incident command system. You have to complete those at some point and give us your certificates. You also have to demonstrate that you have the mental and physical capability necessary to perform the job. You have to have successful completion of a state-approved EMT course, which ours is, successful completion of a state-recognized certification examination, so that's that National Registry cognitive exam, successful completion of the practical certification exam, which again is the psychomotor exam for NREMT, and then you have to comply with all other state, local, and employer provisions. American with Disabilities Act of 1990, so the ADA Act. It protects people who have a disability from being denied access to programs and services that are provided by state or local governments. It prohibits employers from failing to provide full and equal employment to the disabled. So if you can safely complete the job, because remember, one of the licensure requirements is demonstration of the mental and physical ability necessary to safely and properly perform all tasks and functions. If you can do that, irregardless of what disability that you have, you are granted licensure. And then background checks. Most states have various requirements. Pretty much in South Dakota, if you have a felony, it's going to be very hard to get licensure as an EMT. They do recognize some misdemeanors within that category as well. Crimes against persons, major theft, and like DUIs are going to factor into that as well. If you don't have any of those things, you should be good to go. So an overall history of the EMS. There's a long tradition of people that are taking care of other people without it actually being considered an EMS service. Truthfully, we're a very, very new career field. There were volunteer ambulances in World War I, but there really weren't anybody in the back to take care of people. It was basically throw them in a transportation vehicle and go. Field care kind of started in World War II. And then when we really hit the Korean conflict, now all of a sudden there was a medic and rapid medical evac. In 1966, EMS, kind of as we know it today, evolved with the publication of Accidental Death and Disability, the Neglected Disease of Modern Society. This is more commonly known as the white paper that really established our guidelines. The DOT published the first EMT training curriculum in the early 1970s. The American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons prepared and published the first true EMT textbook in 1971, and it was basically the foundation for the book that you have today. The American Academy is kind of our gold standard. They set all of the education guidelines up initially. And then we're in the middle of efforts to kind of standardize the levels of EMS education nationally. There really isn't. There's several different textbooks. There's education standards to how you're supposed to teach, but it's really hard to make sure that everybody's teaching them that way. So how that evolved in the late 1970s, the Department of Transportation developed a recommended national standard curriculum. So this is quite a long time ago. During the 1980s, many areas enhanced that EMT national standard curriculum by adding EMTs with advanced levels of training who could provide key components of ALS care and advanced life-saving procedures. So we kind of established the advanced EMT and the paramedic to a certain extent. In the 1990s, the National Highway Traffic Safety Association developed the EMS Agenda for the Future, which is basically just a document that had a plan to standardize all levels of EMS education and kind of where we wanted to go as a career path, as a provider level. And that was actually revised just recently to the second edition. So it stood for almost 30 years without being revised, and they finally just revised it again. Different levels of training. So the federal level, the National EMS Scope of Practice Model provides guidelines for EMS skills. This document also provides overarching guidelines for the minimum skills each level of EMS provider should be able to accomplish. So this provides what we call our scope of practice. That's very important. You cannot step outside of your quote unquote scope of practice without having some sort of disciplinary action. State level, there's laws that regulate EMS provider operations. Here in South Dakota, we actually have very, very loose laws that regulate EMS operations. There are states that are very involved with EMS operations. The local level, you have a medical director that provides daily oversight and support to your EMS personnel. Examples include like the medications that you're going to be carried on the ambulance, where your patients are transported to. Here in Sioux Falls, we have 2 major hospitals, and there's really no guidance saying you have to take somebody here versus here. Both hospitals are at the same level. Both hospitals can render the same care. It's kind of understood that most, especially critical pediatric patients, are typically brought to Sanford because of the castle, but it doesn't mean that either hospital can't provide adequate care. So here's those different levels of training and how they intersect. Public BLS and immediate aid, there's millions of people that are trained in basic life support, CPR, and then there's some that just have really good common sense and are more than willing to step in and help somebody. There's also increased availability of public access AEDs. That's one big initiative that went out several years ago, where a lot of major public buildings, including schools, concert halls and arenas, have to have an AED on site. So there's a lot more access than there ever has been before for people that go into sudden cardiac arrest. And a lot of people are well trained in how to utilize them. And if not, they basically walk you through it step by step. So most common lay people can operate them without any training. Emergency medical responders generally are first responders that are basically law enforcement officers, firefighters, people that haven't gone through advanced medical training. They provide basic care while waiting for a higher echelon of care. EMR training provides individuals with skills necessary to initiate immediate care and then assist EMTs upon arrival. However, it provides just the immediate basic life support and urgent care, has very limited equipment that's taught in it, so there's not a whole lot that they're going to do. Emergency medical technicians, this is what you're in. So the course is about 150 hours. Some states do have even more hours because they have state requirements on top of what the national standard is. EMTs possess the knowledge and skills to provide basic emergency care, so a little bit more than basic life support. On arrival at the scene, the EMT assumes responsibility for assessment, care, packaging, and transport of the patient to the appropriate facility. Advanced emergency medical technicians adds knowledge and skills specific to ALS, such as IV therapy, advanced airway adjuncts, and administration of a limited number of medications. So just kind of what level you're at, plus a little bit more. The paramedics, like I said, is an extensive course of training, has 1,000 to 1,300 hours that are divided between the classroom and being out in the field, doing clinicals or ride-alongs. The course may be offered with the context of an associate's or a bachelor's degree as part of a college program itself. You have a wide range of ALS skills that are covered, including endotracheal intubation, so putting a tube down your throat so you can breathe, emergency pharmacology, cardiac monitoring, as well as several other skills. We'll continue on in the next video.